Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, protest music, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and this is my co-host, Mr. E. So, Mr. E, how are you going today?
I am very well, 4IS. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm going pretty well, and we're discussing Napoleon today.
Epic topic.
Yes, and
Epic.
I've heard you've been reading a lot about him, and
I have. I
I'm
have.
actually quite intrigued. I've got quite a few
Mm,
questions today.
mm,
But I guess maybe the reason why this topic is very interesting is a lot of people, see him for him being an emperor and, basically putting labels on him
mm,
like a dictator and that sort of thing. But the funny thing was, he was actually quite a revolutionary and in
mm,
more ways than one.
mm, mm.
So, yeah, I guess I thought that would be a good idea to discuss today.
Yes, yes, in June. But like before we get into the meat of this podcast, if I may, um, have you seen the movie Napoleon,
Oh,
the
the
recent
latest one,
one?
the Ridley Scott
Yeah,
one. Yes, I have seen it. I have seen it.
yeah.
So,
And what did you think of it?
um, hey, I liked it, but it wasn't as I thought it was going to be much more battle focused.
Yeah,
Like I,
yeah.
that's what I thought. What I found
Mm,
quite interesting about it is that, um, well, for one, I don't know exactly how historically accurate it is, but two, it felt very. Do you remember the HBO series Rome? It
yeah, yeah,
felt
yeah.
very. It felt very Rome-esque.
Yeah. Okay.
It just so happened to be set in that kind of Napoleon slash Sharp era. It's
Yeah.
if you uh, if, if you picked up the Rome characters and just plopped them into uh, 17th and 18th century,
Mm, mm,
and that was my impression of it. And
yeah.
but and the only other thing that I guess I'll mention is I just found it quite funny how uh, there would be random smash cuts with Josephina's and Napoleon's relationship.
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
would just be um, conversing or waxing poetically together, and
Yeah.
then you'd
Yeah.
have a smash cut of them suddenly having sex. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
felt
Yeah.
like that was very unintentionally funny, but like
Yeah.
I digress. But
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I think
but
that actually is a good kind of platform for me to bounce off because I went into the movie thinking it was going to be because I was very excited to see it, right?
mm,
Um, and yeah, I went into it thinking along the lines that this was going to be a historical piece about the legend, and
mm,
it seemed to be more of um, like a biography, but like a very personal one, almost like Days of Our Lives,
right.
Napoleon, like if you know what I mean. Because everything seems to
Mm.
center around his relationship with Josephine, like quite heavily,
Yes.
which I thought was quite interesting. And like, after studying Napoleon a bit, like him personally, that is, as opposed to
Mm.
kind of just his, military achievements or something like that, which is really what, like, I think a majority of people would just look at his
Mm.
battles or like
Right.
his, the important events in his life, like, when he took power or something like that.
Yes.
Um, you know, like his relationship with Josephine was, very, very important. And
Mm.
like even to the end, like he's writing to her. That was true. He wrote to her
Mm.
prolifically.
Mm.
And like his last words even like featured the name Josephine in them. It's one of the
Right.
last things he did or said that they could make out anyway. Um, but like I think they put way too much focus on it, and like the movie uses it a little bit too much. Like it almost makes it seem like in the Egyptian campaign or the Egyptian segment of the movie, they almost make out like her having an affair and it being plastered in. No, no, not plastered in the paper. Sorry, her having an affair and his friend and colleague Marat, I think it was at the time, telling him that she was having an affair, and he knew about it personally. That was the reason he rushed off back to Paris, like, which is
Right.
just not true. Like, like I'm sure it would have been maybe one of many factors
Mm.
potentially, but like that wasn't the motivating factor. Like he wanted to get back to France because that's where the action was, and things got stale in Egypt.
Right. But
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up that relationship because that's probably one of my first questions. Um, eh, because in that interpretation, Ridley Scott's
Mm.
version,
Yeah.
um, Napoleon is basically a lovesick puppy when it comes to
Yeah.
Josephine. Like,
Yeah.
is that actually historically accurate, or was Ridley Scott taking
Look,
poetic license?
look. I think there is a little bit of that,
Oh, really?
especially in his younger years. So Josephine
Right.
is older than him, and like in his younger years, I think in his like 20s, his mid 20s or early 20s when he meets her. Like she doesn't want to have a bar of him. Like she's got a lover, and like sorry, she's already married to someone else, and then they divorce, and the person she used to be married to, her ex-husband, like tries to set her up with Napoleon. And like I said, she's got lovers and all that sort of stuff. She's got nothing. She doesn't want anything to do with him. And like he's infatuated by her at this point.
Right.
Okay, so absolutely infatuated by her. And like he just goes on this long process of trying to, seduce her and like get her onto his side and all of that sort of stuff. And like she comes from like Martinique, I think she's like Creole. So her father
Mm.
has status because he owns plantations and stuff like that in the colonies. And like he's Corsican, and like traditionally, I think Corsicans, like, being halfway between, Italians and French, maybe more so on the
Right.
Italian side, they're very family focused, and like he shouldn't have married her without like basically his mother's approval and that of his eldest
Mm.
brother as well, who's kind of head of the family. And he goes off and tries to marry her and do all this sort of stuff without anyone knowing. So like it's this massive kind of sore spot for his entire family relationship. Like no one in
Right.
his family wants anything to do with her, but he is infatuated by her and he chases her around and all that. But like the whole time, right, she's just, cheating on him, or not even cheating on him because they're probably not even probably together at this point, but she's chasing other dudes, and she's in love with someone else. And her children, they like Napoleon. He comes over and spends time with them,
Mm.
and stuff like that. And they advise their mother to marry him. They think he's a good option for her.
Mm.
And then like they end up marrying, and it's kind of true, like what the depiction in the movie. It's like this kind of clandestine marriage arrangement, and
Right.
like kind of it just happens really quickly. It's not like overseen by the church. It's a kind of a civil service.
Mm.
And like she doesn't take it seriously. He goes off on campaign and stuff like that. He's writing to her constantly while he's on campaign. Like, when are you coming? When are you coming? I'm dying to see you. And she's just ignoring him. And like he's putting pressure on people around her and people that he's on campaign with that have like, in with her communication wise,
Mm.
trying to put pressure on her to come out, and she's just ignoring him. She just doesn't take him seriously at all.
Yes, and
Yeah.
this is where I'm coming from because in the film they have him like they have a montage of him like just keep him writing all of these letters, and one of the sex scenes in the background where like Josephine's like having sex with one of her lovers, and
Yeah.
he's like,
Yeah.
"Why don't you reply to me?"
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So that was happening a lot in their early years together
right.
and stuff like that. And like I think it's more when he comes back from Egypt, she tries to rush in to, see him, which the movie talks about a little bit, to kind of intercept him before he gets back to Paris and is told by other people what she's been up to and everything. But like he's been having his own affairs. Like in Egypt, he does some, I don't know, there's some French officer like pretty high up there in his kind of council kind of thing. And like he kind of gets rid of this French officer because he wants to have an affair with his wife. And so he's just
Right.
taking out, yeah, yeah, he's taking out this French woman, and they're, shagging everywhere. And like all this sort of stuff. So like, he's doing his own thing. But like,
Mm.
like you're right. The movie makes it out like he's some simp, like kind of thing,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
like cuck for like Josephine and her every whim. But like, it's not. It's not true. Like he's off doing his own thing. He doesn't really care too much. But like he is kind of possessive, I guess. And he wants her to be faithful to him. But like again, by the time he's kind of in a position where he's going to lead a coup
Mm.
and take knock out the Directory in France, the revolutionary government, and become first consul. Like their relationship is much more stable like that. They're on even keel. She
Right.
wants to be with him. She's gotten rid of kind of her partners or her lovers and stuff like that. And she's more there for him as opposed to the other way around. He's still off having his affairs and stuff like that. But she's loyal to him in the sense because he is really bringing home the bacon now, and he is definitely the power figure. And she wants to be part of that because she lives a very extravagant lifestyle, Josephine. And like he
Mm.
almost can't keep up with it. At a certain point, he tells her that she's going to, basically make him bankrupt. That like she just lives an absolute life of luxury. And but like he
Right.
takes that up too as he becomes emperor and all that sort of stuff. They describe him as almost having more of an opulent life than the Bourbons that he replaced. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, he lives such extravagance. Yeah, in the end, like as the emperor and first consul, like people are kind of a bit taken back by that. So I think they put a lot of emphasis on Josephine, and she was very integral. And like, it would have been more interesting for them to explore this angle, I think, in the movie, just personally, because like
Mm.
she was very diplomatic and she was higher born than him, and so she knew how to handle things like with an air of finesse and charisma, like
Right.
socially, with the upper classes and the right people that he just did not have. And so, like,
Mm.
she continually tells him, and like, I think she does quote this in the movie that she's cleaning up his mess. And she's not talking about like physically or domestically. She's talking about in social settings. Like, he's a bit awkward sometimes and he says the wrong thing to people. And she like mops up for him and like smooths over social situations and like,
Mm.
makes good on some of the crap that he's peddling, or like the multitude of people that he's offended with his presence, kind of thing. And she just moves over that, and everybody kind of smiles because Josephine's in the room. So they're actually quite a good pair, like that. And like they're,
Mm.
and they go through a lot together. And so he really looks at her as like this kind of like almost a best friend in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you do get that sense, probably near the end of the film when he does eventually divorce her and then marries the Austrian. I think it was the
Yes, an
Austrian
Austrian princess, one of the
princess.
Habsburgs. Yeah,
Yes.
Maria Louise, Marie
Yes.
Louise.
And then yeah, they stay in touch. He like
Mm.
constantly he still visits her and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
But
see, the studies that I've done, like it does peter off. Like he does fall in
right.
love with his new wife, but like he always looks after Josephine. And like the letters become a little bit less intense. He's still writing to her, asking for advice, seeing how she is. He gives her a massive pension from the state, and then some from his own personal funds and wealth.
Mm.
And so she's set for life, kind of thing, in Malmaison, which is the house that you see her in
Yeah.
all the time in the movie, where he's visiting her. And Alexander, so Tsar Alexander visits her, and like remember he's in exile in Elba, the first island he
Yeah.
gets exiled to, and he sees in the paper that like Alexander's been at Malmaison and having it off with Josephine, and he flies into a rage, hitting
Mm.
the table or something with the newspaper. And then the next scene you see he's back in France marching through,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
again they use this in the movie, this trope that it's Josephine that's inspired him to leave whatever territory he's in, first Egypt. Now he's leaving exile in Elba because he's pissed off and he wants to, see Josephine again. But like, it's funny because in actuality, um, Tsar Alexander actually meets Josephine in Malmaison, but while he's still in France, he hasn't been exiled yet.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So he's still kicking around in France. He's just been defeated at that point after the Russian campaign, and Alexander comes all the way to Paris. like all the way. I didn't realize the Russians actually got all the way to Paris. And not sacked the city, but they laid siege to it. And he goes off to Malmaison to see her, and like spend a bit of time with her. And I think that probably didn't go down too well with Napoleon, but he wasn't even exiled at that point.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a theme here that it's not necessarily the parts that are the poetic license, it's putting them at different stages that
Putting it
it's
in
not. Yeah.
yeah. So like that's why I think there's a bit too much emphasis on her. Like she's the motivation for some of his things, some of these big historical events that have happened. But like it's that's just a bit of artistic license, if you ask me. Yeah.
Mm.
So like it's an interesting depiction, but like I think there is way too much weight given to their relationship in that sense.
Okay. Though there was a term that you used before that I kind of want to know more about. Causian. So because is it like the Catalonians, like in Spain, that
Oh right. So
they're related to France, but they're
yeah,
like a different uh yeah, I
it's interesting, right? Because like there's the island of Corsica, right?
right, okay, it's an
Yeah,
island. Gotcha,
yeah. So
gotcha.
there's an island of Corsica, and it's kind of like in the dip that goes around before you get into the boot of Italy, kind of thing, the long
Right.
slender form of Italy. And it's like sometimes it's French, sometimes it's Italian, like kind of thing. It's interesting history because like I think when Napoleon is born, or like he's in his mother's stomach still, it's Italian, and like when he's born, technically it's still Italian,
Mm.
kind of thing. And the Corsicans are rising up, right? And basically, yeah, they're rebelling against their Italian rulers at the time, and he's born during all of this rebellion. And anyway, the Italians kind of just turn around to the French at that point and say, "Look, we can't be bothered fighting this uprising. Do you want it?" And so the French send like 30,000 troops or something over to Corsica to kind of quell the rebellion and just lay claim to it. And so the story goes is he's born during this rebellion, then it becomes French. But in the history books, he changes his birth date to the date when it actually becomes French after that. So he
Right.
can legally claim, and his father can legally claim that he should be given like money to be able to study in a French school and become an officer, where he learns to be an artillery officer. So they have
Mm.
to prove that he's French, and they have to prove then also that they've got some type of nobility. And so, um, as a proud Corsican family that doesn't really have like an established nobility, or a very small one, like they just have to make a name for themselves in order to claim that they're noble. And so, yeah, there's this whole drama about how they establish themselves, and he will later make claim that he is French because the island of Corsica was French at the time he was born, and so the legend
Right.
goes. Yes, but like really, he was Italian. He was born when the island was under Italian control, and like he spends a lot of his early life. If you want to go back to your very original question from like almost 20 minutes ago now,
Mm.
was he revolutionary? He was a massive revolutionary supporter because he was through and through Corsican.
Yes.
Um, and like much of his, young life, like a teenager to very early 20s, was spent like kind of um, honoring this man named Paoli, I believe it was, who was a Corsican rebel who started this
Mm.
rebellion when he was born, and he was trying to basically use that guy as his hero, and his mentor, to start his own Corsican rebellion.
Mm.
and like he wanted to get Corsican independence. So he was all for revolutionary France because revolutionary France was the center of liberalism, this new ideology that was
Mm.
sweeping the Western world and was going to replace centralized monarchies and all that sort of stuff. And they were going. It was the way that the Corsicans were going to get their independence and be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And so he was an absolute revolutionary. And like when he's a young officer, like he's getting into fights with other officers in mess holes that because like they are either not revolutionary at all in their leanings, or they're not revolutionary enough for him, and he like
Right.
jumps down their throat about it, and annoys a lot of people because he's just such a passionate revolutionary, which
Well,
is funny
but
where he ends up, right?
yes, but also he was part of the French Revolution. Like, wasn't he a captain in the Battle of Toulon? Like, didn't he
Well, like,
lead troops?
yeah. He fights
Yeah.
for like the revolutionary side. So, like in France at the
Yeah.
time where he's cutting his teeth, yes, like there is kind of like a civil war going on, right? You
Mm.
have like parts of France that are still like it's revolutionary France, but there's still parts of France that are very royalist, and Toulon is a royalist town, and that's like basically where the movie opens up, right? It's on campaign in
Yes.
Toulon, and he's like
Yeah.
on the horse, and he's nervous, and he's about to lead the charge, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so he's in the revolutionary army in the sense that like he's on the side of the French nation. That just because you're on the side of the French nation, I don't think makes you particularly revolutionary just from the outset. Like there are,
Mm.
you know, people that just ended up being in that part of France, and so they're obviously on the revolutionary side, if you know what I mean. Or they
Yeah.
didn't cross over into royalist territory, and so they're not considered a royalist. But like certain people particularly will describe themselves as revolutionaries, and like
Mm.
he does describe himself as being revolutionary. And like I said, I think that comes a lot from his desire to see Corsican independence.
Mm. But like I guess a lot of people focus on the battles, or at least his relationship with the revolutionaries in the French Revolution.
Mm.
But not only in I guess battles, but a lot of people should really focus on what he did with structuring the state, because isn't that the whole thing? He established in Europe the civil code, and um, how like, and he has a lot of influence on liberal democracies as we see
Yeah,
them today.
massively,
Yeah.
especially like still in France today. Like, France today is basically politically structured in a way that was implemented by Napoleon.
Hmm.
Like, um, like in Australia, for example, we're a federation, so we're a bunch of federated states.
Yeah.
Okay, so the states have a level of autonomy, and yes, they answer to the federal government. But like I said, they have their own autonomy, and then you have local governments under there that have their own autonomy too. But like the states basically do their own thing to a certain
Yes.
extent. And yes, you have like one centralized place, which is the capital of the nation, and like things go on. But that's really just largely like diplomatic stuff, like, and foreign affairs, and like large scale national projects. But like I said, like a lot of stuff happens at the state level. Now when like Napoleon gets in, like he really ramps up the ideas of like the regions, like having a bunch of regions throughout France, with Paris at its core. So there's no
Hmm.
states. So like in the US, you have a conglomeration of states.
Hmm.
Uh, but like there is no states in France. They are, like I said, they're regional areas, and the regional areas are broken into districts, and districts broken into like kind of local councils and stuff like that. And so um, he's very kind of very important and integral in rolling this system out. And like more than that, he wants such a control on the knowledge. He centralizes everything. So, like I said, everything comes back to France. He's not only picking like the governors of each region or the heads of each region, but he's also picking the
Right.
head of every single local government in France. So every single
Right.
mayor in every town in France or every local government area in France is appointed by him personally. And so like he sets
Wow.
up the system. Yeah, he sets up the systems of government that France, has today and how it's broken up today, and like the way it's administered. He's setting up like the judicial system and the legal systems and stuff like that. He's helping support like the ideas of like liberalism in terms of its scientific values. He's big supporter of the arts, and he's setting up like arts
Mm.
institutes everywhere and like universities everywhere, and he's doing massive public works campaigns like everywhere. He's like building roads because it's just like Rome to him. This was all about creating the new Rome, and so like all roads lead to Paris kind of thing. And you can see it today if you've ever looked at a map of like France and stuff like that with like its roads, like a big picture of it, all its roadways, like everything is just going. All roads lead to Paris, like kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And so like yeah, he was instrumental in that and like creating the new constitution. So like when he comes in as first consul, they have a constitution. When he's emperor, they like making changes to the constitution. And as he's going around liberating like the European nations and stuff like that, he's giving them new constitutions. There's a constitution for like the newly liberated northern Italian area and like the Prussian or the Germanic people that he's taking over. He's implementing new constitutions in the papal states and in like the even in Spain he's helping them with theirs. Like so everywhere he's going, he's like seen like initially that is as like a liberator, and so
Right.
he's setting up constitutions for these people. That's like we've talked about this a lot in this podcast.
Mm.
That's revolution right there. Like
Right.
setting up,
Yes.
reconstituting the people and setting up certain the ways that they're going to be governing themselves and owning their own national sovereignty and things like that. Like he's spreading that stuff nonstop, and he's using his French lessons as a blueprint to be able to put these new constitutions out throughout Europe.
But that raises an interesting question. Was he using the constitutions? Because like I guess I want to go back to the parallel between Rome and France in this scenario. Was he using the constitutions much like um, I guess Roman law was, where it's like, well, once you're a Roman citizen, you're a Roman citizen for life, and
Mm.
you have certain privileges, etc., etc. Like as Napoleon the Liberator, was he changing the constitutions where it's like a similar kind of uh, gig, or at least
Well,
privileges, like the Romans did?
like under the Constitution and like the kind of civil code, like so like their Bill of Rights, um, like this is a liberal, this is like old school liberal time in the world.
Yes.
So like you have different types of citizens, and like this is the revolutionary France that I'm talking about here. You have active citizens and passive citizens. So you
Mm.
have citizens who have citizenship and they have rights, but like you have active citizens that actually have rights and take a role in political life. So
Mm.
usually in a liberal society around this time, the only ticket into being an active citizen is you're a property owner. You got property, then you can vote,
Yes.
and you have to be a man. So if you're a man and you've got property, then you can vote. So that's not unusual in the liberal world at that time. Like you're in a real qualification for civilian life with responsibility or with participation is to have those things checked off. You have to make a certain income or you have to have a certain amount of property before you can, you actually have some stake in the political scene.
Mm.
So like, yeah, they're constituting things like that and like giving people rights and all these sort of things, like the rights of man and but like again, there's like provisions around that. You don't just get it automatically. And like like I'll give you like if you're looking for a correlation with Rome, like
Yeah.
he's very Roman in the sense of like he makes a name for himself on campaign and for his military exploits. And so
Mm.
he always promises his soldiers that they will be able to return to France and he'll give them land and all that sort of stuff, which is a very Roman
Right.
thing, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So rewarding your soldiers with, being able to take up opportunity when they return from campaign.
Well, I kind of want to keep that analogy going though, because is that the revolutionary lessons that Napoleon takes? Well, I guess from the French Revolution, because that's the whole thing about the first, the second take at the Declaration of the Rights of Man, and like it sets up a lot of promises that it gives the French people,
Mm,
and
mm,
I would say near the end of it, especially when you consider things after the Terror,
mm,
um, a lot of those promises aren't fulfilled, like the ideas of liberty, fraternity, and equality.
mm.
And
But like you have
like
to, yeah, sorry.
all I was going to say is, uh, well, I guess Napoleon does fill that void, and he ends up in some degree fulfilling those promises.
Yes, yes. And like I think Napoleon is kind of the best kind of he's the epitome of the revolutionary kind of ideal. Because like he is, for all intents and purposes, he's not noble. He's not. Like his family does make a claim
Mm.
to it, so they can get like him into a military school and all that sort of stuff, and get a bursary so he can afford to go there. Like the state kind of pays for him. But like the French never really recognized them as actual nobility from Corsica, and they didn't really think of them as such. And so like really the only reason that he is able to go through the ranks of the French military is because of the ideas of liberty and equality. So if all men are born equal, then like it's actually your merits that should promote you in civil service in life, all right?
Yeah,
And so he's able to, like I said, rise through the ranks and actually get to a position of some pretty crazy power, which he ends up using to his absolute advantage ultimately. But like he
mm.
gets to positions of power because of these liberal ideals. And so like you can kind of look at it from like today's perspective and say, oh, they're not really there's not really liberty, like they're still living in quite an authoritarian environment, and like there's people that are being killed all the time and
Mm.
there's some pretty crazy stuff going on. So is there really liberty and equality and all this sort of stuff? But that notion that like he could have risen through the ranks the way he did and become a general and then use that as a foothold to then become the first consul and the emperor, that is it right there.
Yeah,
He's right. That is the ultimate of his time. That is the ultimate rags to riches story. That is the liberal dream right there. Like, raised in obscurity on an island of not even on the mainland of Europe,
yeah.
and becomes the emperor of the most important continental European nation of the time. Like that's incredible.
Well, I
Absolutely
guess.
incredible.
Well, yes, and I guess the modern day notion of that is called the American dream. But
Yeah, yeah.
but I guess we're getting off topic here. But
Mm.
like, would you say that maybe Napoleon is the epitome of the idea of meritocracy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like, because that's an important thing for their age. Really important thing. Because like up until just like 10 years before he starts, really making a name for himself, it's like it doesn't matter of your merits. It has nothing to do with your
Hmm.
merits. At a certain point, it only matters what your family name is.
But I guess more to your point, I guess when you were mentioning that straw man that would have said like, oh well, the 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 terror and everything that was coming out of the French Revolution, it was incredibly bloody, and uh and all of that. The other thing to mention to you that it was really important, those ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity, is that we were coming out of a period where I guess with Louis the 16th and everything that The bread prices were going through the roof, and people were starving. There was a lot of civil unrest. And what were all the nobles doing?
Yeah.
They were just sitting in Versailles and
Yeah.
just living it
Yeah.
up.
Living it
Like,
up. Yeah.
and plus, like, I guess that would have to be the case when you have a famous noble that just turns around and, well, I don't know how accurate the quote is, but obviously Marie Antoinette says, "Let them eat cake."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
uh, you you don't have that quote exist if somebody is completely detached from reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that like the important part of that quote, if it is that's the way she said it, is more the sentiment that it encapsulates, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Like there's a feeling of absolute indifference to the people of France. There's a separation between the royalty and or people of status
Mm,
and everybody else, and like that's tearing the nation to pieces. Like they're living in absolute economic instability,
mm,
and like people are poor and starving, and like the people kind of want some type of reprieve from that, but they also want some type of vengeance or revenge for how they've been treated, and that boils over in the French Revolution.
mm,
Quite to the shock of most of mainland Europe and England, because it's unlike the English and the American revolutions that have happened before. It's more passionate, and it has larger implications for the surrounding kingdoms and monarchies.
mm,
And they can see this time these liberal ideals are going to go further than just being maintained within the nation, and they're going to spill over into other nations, and which is exactly what happens. And while there's plenty of reactionary movements that happen, and liberalism doesn't take over straight away, it will. And like Napoleon or the French Revolution and Napoleon ends up spreading that across the mainland. And it's and like I said, while those like the royals never go away, they're not going to be around for much longer after that, maybe 100 years more in some cases, if they're lucky. And then it's all liberal democracy after that.
mm,
So, like, yes, you could say he's a real revolutionary because he was kind of the bringer of liberal democracy to the rest of the Western world outside of
mm,
England and the United States, which is massive, massive for someone who was who labeled himself as an emperor. It's just like the irony is so ironic. Like it's just it's like that Family Guy quote. The two guys standing around that fire after they burn all the guns, and he's like, when you asked me that definition of irony the other day.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So like it's just it's incredible because he was revolutionary in that sense. But like even the way that he became the emperor was revolutionary in and of itself. So
What you mean the coup?
yeah, like the coup, but like that was one thing where he took power for him and the three consuls, but like really it was just him as first consul. Like the other two really didn't have a shoe in, and he made sure of that. But like when he decided to become emperor, like the people of France at that time, they wanted that. They were looking for that. They were looking for the stability of a monarchy because like they'd just been through the turbulence of the revolutionary period, right?
Mm,
The liberal revolution that swept through the nation, and like you had like these groups of people that were trying to lead the country in the form of the Directory, and like because of this idea of liberalism and democracy, they were trying to make decisions as a group, and it was causing a lot of chaos and a lot
mm,
of confusion and instability, and like where do we send our armies and where do we concentrate our resources, and what enemy do we fight next, and all this sort of stuff, and like that bureaucracy that comes with democracy was slowing things down.
mm,
And so like the people were kind of like, we miss having the stability of a monarch, just like one person who can just be like, all right, we're all going to turn our heads in this direction right now. And like that's when Napoleon was kind of like, well, the people want the stability of monarchy, but like they're not going to accept a king, and like I don't want to be called a king, you know. And he's just like, what's the next best thing? I'll just become an emperor then. It's like a, well,
Mm.
it's just like, um, splitting hairs really, but like, they wanted
Mm.
that stability. They wanted one person to kind of be making the shots. And Napoleon, up until that point, had just been like, win on the board, win on the board, win on the board kind of thing. And like, don't get me wrong, his propaganda campaigns are incredible. Like
Mm.
he is a master of propaganda, this guy. So like, if you want a lesson to learn from Napoleon, it's how to manipulate and control public opinion. He was so good at that. He was a master of that. Like even in like these big battles that you hear that like, he's won extremely and all that sort of stuff. It was probably not as amazing as everyone remembers it or recalls it, because he was just so good at making out like he'd won by some extreme amount or something like that, where in
Mm.
actuality he might have only just scraped by in that battle. But like when he sends reports home, it's just like, yeah, we were bathing in the enemy's blood and like we lost like two people, and they lost 10,000, like kind of,
Yeah, because I guess that's kind of the thing, right? Because when you talk about propaganda, like even if you're not focusing in within, I guess French society, like whenever I've encountered like Napoleonic era, like war films, like whenever you have like the English or whoever it is that is coming up against Napoleon. It's the French columns that they're worried about. That's why I was incredibly surprised when I heard that he was I guess, a master with the cannon, because like all the films they focus on like his vanguard and the French columns and how they're a force to be reckoned with, and I was kind of really surprised.
Well, like, yeah, there's a lot of kind of this mythology built up around his tactics and like his soldiers too,
Yeah.
because of like the way initially what happens is the way that he's able to win so many things is because of the speed of which he's able to move his armies. So the French soldier,
Mm.
because um, of the way he moves them and turns them and everything like that, he marches them pretty much into the ground in most cases, but he moves them in such a way that they're always in a vantage point and taking the enemy by surprise. They're never well resourced too much, especially in the start and towards the end of like his rule. And so like it's actually about their fighting style. The thing that really makes the legend so important. And the other European nations, like the British, were not really a force to be reckoned with on the land at all. It was just their ships, and Napoleon hated that. And so
Mm.
like the British were never that great on the land. They just didn't have the numbers that like the big continental powers had. But like the continental powers, what was happening with them, because they were monarchies and they were still living in like this old way, they weren't liberalized yet. They they had like, high ranking officers who were all nobility and thought that like they were meant to be there, and so like they had no motivation to really make a name for themselves. It was just playing war games for them. But the
Right.
French, though, one, the people were fighting for their nation, because at the time of the
Mm.
revolution, they were fighting to regain French soil and things, territories that used to be called French.
Mm.
And like fighting for their honor. So they had a means and a reason to fight. The people that they were fighting against, the soldiers that they were fighting against, were
Mm.
mercenaries or people that were enlisted in the army and had no reason to be there. And then the French officers, who like the meritocracy idea that we were talking about before,
Mm.
they were getting promoted, and like they wanted to make a name for themselves, and like
Yeah.
they were going to use their promotion and like their skill and their knowledge and whatever else that they had to try and win in a glorious fashion. And so like the French had that above everyone else. They were
Mm.
passionate and they wanted to be there, and they were just crushing people because of that. And like the European powers at the time were just like, oh my god. But like, and like, yes, he kind of helped, and like the French made sure they kind of revolutionized their army in the sense that they got better technology and all that sort of stuff. But by the end of the campaign, sorry, towards the end of his rule, the other European powers are wising up massively in a military sense. They're getting better technology, they're getting better troops on board, they're getting better tactics because they're realizing they're fighting against Napoleon and they're learning from him. And like he, by the end, is investing nothing, which is really surprising because you wouldn't expect this from a figure like this because that's not the legend you hear. But he's
Hmm.
not investing any money in technological development. And like the
Yeah.
Russians, the Austrians, all these people are investing like big money in trying to get new cannons and new guns, and the English are bringing in rifles and stuff like that. And the French are still using the same muskets that they were using 30 or 40 years ago.
Hmm.
And like by the end of his reign, that's a massive detriment to them. And it's probably part of the reason why they started losing towards the end because there's no R&D. Like
Yeah.
he's Napoleon and he's going to win because he's got sick tactics and stuff like that. And they get wise to what he's doing, and like it doesn't
Hmm.
work like it used to.
Yeah.
So like yes, there's a massive legend around the French military prowess and their culture, but it
Hmm.
gets undone in the end because of neglect, which is sad to see, I guess you could say. But like, it's good for everyone else, good for the English. They lapped it up. Good for the Austrians, the Germans.
Sounds like capitalism won in the end.
Ha, yes. Well, that goes with the spread of liberal democracy, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah, like he could have forced liberalism on as many people as he wanted to, but like the royals came back. It wasn't until the economic mode really took off that the
Hmm.
liberal democracy then came in. But like he
Yes.
set the way, don't get me wrong,
Hmm.
for that
Yeah.
political transition, I think.
Okay. Well, I felt like I've learned a lot today, so thank you, Mr. A.
Hmm.
Last section, as always. What's that synthwave art? So today we have Napoleon freeing French society in revolution.
Yeah, right. Right. And it's funny because there's no picture of the French society in that, is there? There's not like
No,
there's
but
nothing in there.
well, yes, but I wonder if that's the whole point to the civic building in the background.
Right, right. Yeah, I guess so. But like it's
And
really imposing authoritarian military stuff going on there. There's no freeing the people.
well, in revolution, my first thought was it actually supposed to be him as a captain in the Battle of Toulon?
Right. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that makes sense. But then again, like what he's wearing, he's probably more than a captain.
Mm, mm. Well, it's interesting because there's like a famous picture of him on like the horse and he's like cape and everything is blowing in the
Yeah,
wind and he's doing
yeah,
some gesture with his hands. And
yes.
like it's not like this because like apparently the gesture like most of the leaders of the time were either having a sword in their hand or pointing at something, which is a very military-esque thing to do with your hands in that type of portrait. But like he's not doing that, he's kind of doing another signal, and it's supposed to mean like he's a good leader. And so like by the end of it he's really trying to paint this picture that he is an emperor, not a general. And
Right.
so like this is an interesting take on that with the fingers like going like that. Like what does that mean? Is it like a little pew pew kind of thing, or is it like is he pointing to a sense of enlightenment somewhere off screen that we can't see?
Yeah, maybe that's supposed to be um, a subversion of the point.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So
But the
this may
hand
be
gestures
enough.
is very important though in this type of stuff and this type of military painting and everything. So like the AI is bang on with this one for us.
Well, that's I guess that's where I'm going with is that the AI has produced subversion gold for
Mm.
whatever reason.
Yeah, yeah. And like we don't know why, the AI doesn't know why, but it's bang on. Let's go with that.
Okay, and with that, we'll close out this episode. And for you watching at home, remember to like, share, and subscribe if you liked this podcast.
Please.
And remember to keep thinking and keep learning. And I'll leave it to you to sign off, Mr. A.
Thank you very much for AS. And to all of you out there, please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.